drawing it inwards and upwards. So to access the back line and the deep front line, the angle of the legs is paramount. We cannot be hanging forward. We want neutral legs. And how to very quickly join to the back line and to lift the front line, the angle of the tailbone, the base of the spine, is paramount. That tailbone, if you trace your index finger down the back and feel it, that must lengthen straight down between your heels. And when it does, feel how there's a subtle natural bend in the knees, and you'll feel that you can get those gluteal creases to sharpen. And you want to trace the sit bones, ischial tuberosities, to behind the knees to push down into the central heel. When you have that tailbone down, naturally, it helps lift the sling of the pelvic floor up, and it draws the organs back in and up. So it's not a needing to pull the belly in. The tailbone draws down, the pelvic floor floats, and the organs draw back into place. So often you'll see someone hanging their thighs, and it looks like the abdomen's hanging out, but genuinely the organs are not being supported from gravity, and gravity is pulling on the organs. Not a good situation for stagnating of the lymph here. We want everything to have a good tense circuitry and sling and a holding. So tailbone down, organs in and up, and you're accessing that Mula Bandha, that pelvic floor, dome lift. Okay, so we've got the feet sorted. Then we've got to look down our lines and see, we're not dropping hot blocks. These ones here are a little bit thick. There you go. All right, and then you can see the angle of the shins, and you'll see if one shin is wanting to pull back or pull out more. And we want those shins to be even. The knees, how are the knees? Are the kneecaps pulling out or in? Are these lines, have they been overly spiraling out? Or have they been overtly spiraling? And ideally, we want the spirals to meet in an even stream so that it's hip to center knee to middle toe. And these kneecaps are not pulling in or out, and one isn't pulling further back than another. See if my leg is back, see how it will pull the back out and the ripple effect that it will have in twisting and dropping all those neural plexuses. So this needs to be steered in and even and neutral, 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 neutral. Same with neutral mind, a neutral approach to the thoughts. Okay, here, and once you've got that in, you've got a micro bend behind the knees, and you can push down through the back of the legs. You have a look, see, is one thigh built up more than another, just one push more forward than another? And can we do subtle things to draw an evenness here? And then to see the blocks, you'll see if maybe one is pulled up more, skewed out more. So that even the way that we're holding the blocks is going to give you such information with those lines. And either side of the pubic plate, this needs to be even. A tight in a groin, you have somehow dropped and skewed back the pubic plate. And if either side of the pubic plate, those insertion points that if those are even up, they're also a key for walking and a key for stability when someone is having such difficulty in balancing. If they get here at either side of the pubic plate, that to comfortably feels like little hooks that hook over the fingers. If those even out, those hook even of those fingers and you neutralize them, take a lot of pain out of the hips, but also help somebody to access much clearer tracking and balance with walking if they've been dropping those lines. Okay, then you frame around this pubic plate, and here, what you want to see is that the pubic plate is neutral to the frame. And how you'll find maybe one hip, even though you feel like they're pushing, is still pulling back, but often you can't clearly discern that. So what you look for here is tailbone down, neutral, legs even. And then you look here from wrist crease to wrist crease, and you see if those would line up, or if one is slightly collapsed back or skewed. Yeah. Okay, and you need to take time to just feel how that was. Now what's lovely here is when this all evens out, and that pubic plate presses through that triangle of the hands, The back line is clearly accessed. The gluteal creases, they do sharpen. We want them to sharpen evenly. And spring load the back of the legs, that there's a spring loading feeling, action behind the legs. Between the hip bones and the pubic plate, so here is a triangular plate, and then here is a broader triangle, a longer triangle. Between these hip bones and the front, they must level off, but between the hip bone and the pubic plate, see if you can get an equilateral distance and triangle. One side, when you put your heel of your hand like a karate chop in, you'll feel pushed back from the inside. Now, the one that's pushing back, you've been overusing, it's tighter. And the solution is not to try and stretch that out, but push down a bit more firmly on the looser side, the more empty side, the more open side. You push down there, you start to access that one clearer. And it will help you cultivate an equilateral triangle. And notice the effect it has on the back of the legs. Okay, and we need to work from whatever's closest to the spine. Have that as your starting point. There are so many different facet joints here. Whatever's closest to the spine, start there and then map it out or pattern it out. So you'll see there's beautiful lines, parallel lines, squared off lines, and there are a lot of triangular patterning in the body. There's a pubic plate patterning. Here, we've got this patterning. And if you flipped your hands to the back, you'll feel the triangular sacral plate. And if you flip your hands, one hand at each side, you'll feel that very often, don't be just alarmed by it, one side of the plate will be popped more back. You'll feel that one back pelvis nodule pushing back more. This is a very pliable plate. For women, when you give birth, that plate pops off. So those plates can really draw back in. So don't push it back in, but see if you can do such a little shifts through the legs, through the pelvis, to get that more even and those back nodules to line up. So got these reference points and use your hands in your practice. Now inside those nodules, there is a very common discomfort people will feel with those sacral iliacs, and that they can be quite sappy and rolly, and sometimes they roll over that nodule and they get a bit caught. And when you can get those back nodules to line up, you can get those internal lines, those sacral iliacs, to slide back into place, and then there's more tight pulling and tugging inflammation there. So sacrum firming down through the back of the legs, that must push down. And now we're going to learn to access a float up, both through the deep front line and a stroke up through the front line. These hip flexors, we use them inefficiently or too much, excessively for movement. These should not be gripping hard external from the body. They are also so wonderfully movable. You can feel that you stroke them over your hip bones into a soft abdomen. Real core is not hard. It's not an external resistance. It is an internal float that helps us to stack our structure away from the loading of gravity. And when you look at beautiful architecture, you'll see how, like Gaudi, see these amazing domes holding up the structure. When we can float them, and you can only float them when you know how to release these external grippings and holdings, you get the tailbone down to help with the first pelvic floor float. And then to stand in the back line, that is firming down to push into gravity, whilst these internal domes are floating up to create this grounded levity. And in yoga, there's so much of these supposed opposites, but they work. Even within all the joints, we create all these isometric co-contractions to hold everything. So now when working with gravity, we wish to consciously push down to get a rebound. If I ran strong and fast into the wall, it's gonna bounce me off. And the same here, if I push down, it floats me up, it bounces me back up. So here, we're just checking these patterns out of here. So you'll feel if one wants to push out, and when it does, see how it will push other things out. But instead of trying to, then I'll get a stiffness here, again, stretch it out. What I need to do is simply draw it back in. Yeah. All right, so here, back plate. We've got these lines on, we check that triangle. Now, shoulder girdle, you can trace from armpit to armpit. These you want to line up so that there's not one arm out, but again, what will this be doing for my lungs, heart, and everything going on here? And when we get whatever is fully pushing out, we draw it back in and up. See how it leveled off my shoulders. So here, armpit to armpit, that must level out. And we want to create a sense of these wings being our main mover for the upper girdle. So armpits linking through to ribs. And when you do that, and you feel that, you might even feel the effect of these learning to hold on, back of the legs, ribs, going down to navel, and then a broader. So see how here is a triangle, and then there's a outer triangle, which we also want to be equilateral, even lines, drawing towards the pubic plate. And when this can anchor towards the pubic plate, the back line is becoming far more beautifully expansive, lined up. There's no more dropping along that vertebral column. And the patterns that you're perceiving here, the same patterns are reflected in the back line. Sacral plate, back pelvis to tailbone, back ribs to behind the navel, and armpit back ribs to the tailbone. And when we can get all these triangles, here is also a triangle. I mean, if you look at my legs, it is very much going triangular too, and that might just be my very, very, very small calf muscles. We get so optimally slotted. The spine, we want it to be centered between square of pelvis, square of shoulders. Okay. Now, to line up certain other key points, those sit bones, we want the apex of them straight down. So they're like very roly wheels. We don't want it to be rolling out and up, rolled out wheel. We want those main pinnacle points of the sit bones to line up, and then we must feel like we pike up and out of those. And those, feel the effect of how they pike these hip bones. And then in the sacral plate, the lower back, feel the effect of how it's piked in or drawn in. If you feel it, you'll feel like those nodules, if you're doing it properly, you feel like those nodules are not anymore bulking out so much, and there will be no more pain in the sacroiliacs. If there still is, you just need to go for a micro bend in the knees, but not a collapsed knee, activated spring load, rebound, pushing down. And then these nodules here, you'll feel how, you can imagine sit bones and those little backbone plates. And if you trace up the ridge of the skull, the occipital ridge, now on either side of the brainstem, you'll feel those nodules. And those also are very roly wheels. One might be collapsed in, or collapsed out, or winged out. We want those to line up, and not only to line up, we want to see where those pivot point, where that peak is, where that apex is. We want that to be totally lined up, and it feels like those line up with those back nodules line up, and we picked up on those sit bones, and it feels amazing. You might still feel like with me now, I can feel, okay, well, that's good, I'm getting it all well and good, but I can feel internally my one internal wing, my one cells is still trying to take a lot of this. See how it's wanting to go, and then it's trying to still take it on the inside. Okay, so now we talked about some of those outer structures to line them up, to flatten our structure. But those inner structures are beautiful and fascinating. And it's another triangular patterns, well, pretty much like a triangle with ribbons between inside pubic bone and then the back ribs. There are these triangular ribbons, and we need to get those on to fan open these wings, they need to find open, evenly expansive. So the sore side will be slightly tighter and a bit of a crumpled wing. And to unfurl that one, we need to inside, behind the outer abdominals, deep inside. First, we need to know how to access this float of the pelvic floor, cranial body, and diaphragm. And then to expand, open the looser side to feel that we get into that psoas wing, and that begins to activate between the insertion point and the pubic plate, will open up the internal tightening, and then that will be able to find open. And what those do is they're helping to evenly level out the shoulder girdle and the pelvic girdle, those ones. Now, that is a story, but how does one tangibly and viscerally do that? And there are these amazing tricks that will train in that patterning. So the one I mentioned was that the hands can work as a puppeteer. Once you know what you're looking for, you can use the hands like a conductor. You need the imagination, but imagination based on reality is very powerful, and it becomes visceral and a tangible, known experience. So standing, let's recheck our lines, feet, outer ankle, inner ankle, front and back, in and up, so that there's a straight line through the ankle. There's no collapse of an ankle, which you'll see with that diagonal distortion or disruption. Hips, knees, middle toe, sit bones to behind the heels with a spring load action. Pressing through the heels and the front rim of the foot under the mount of the big toes and baby toe, middle toe, putting an in and outer arch. Get that Jeannie Holmes. It's a suction cup dome behind the knee. You'll feel it when you can press down firmly into the feet with a micro bend. Angle of the tailbone straight down. Sacral plate expansive, like a bow of a ship that expands open comfortably. And this internal parachuting float with the pelvic floor and the diaphragm. Framed pubic bone, even pubic bone, hips to even pubic, these V, this triangular line. I won't say V lines, so don't want V lines. Sacral plate, these to line up, okay, these wings to axis open, ridge of the skull up, Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Jalandhara Bandha. And now, when it comes to here, use your hands first just to feel it and see if you can steer in between the ribs and the pubic bone, okay. Subtle body bend of the knees, push to the back body. And then to feel more clearly into that float of those internal flows, there's a wonderful trick with the hands whereby you dome into the center palm of the hand. And when you draw it up in front of, mirroring in front of or reflecting that line, you imagine and you focus on that float of the pelvic floor and the perineal body. Usually, you'll find that the looser side, or the more supposedly comfortable side, you need to focus even in that part of the pelvic floor to float up more. So I imagine that the dome of my hand is the perineal body and pelvic floor, and I dome that one in and up. And then as that begins to zip up or drawstring up or elevate up, when it comes past here, now I'm going to redome and pick up this lunar-shaped parachute of the diaphragm to also dome in and up, all the while keeping my back and my legs on. And then here, as I go through the throat pit, and how this is going to stack my cervical spine up. So this is a nice way to see how can I access that deep front line, all the while I'm imprinting onto my blocks, and I'm firming back body down into the earth, front body internally floated. Okay, and then psoas wings. Quite a nice trick is once you can feel that there's these internal ribbons. In the beginning, same for me, felt so empty. I can imagine it, but yeah, I mean, I can feel some things up, but how do we get in there? So you got to imagine, you got to get the back line on, and then you draw your 3 middle fingers in, and you pull your thumbs up and your pinky fingers down. So I'm going to come into the camera closer. That's what I mean here. So this was the dome of Perineal body, pelvic floor, diaphragm, my back line's on, I've got to get my tailbone on. If it's not down, there's no ways, it's all gonna hang out, okay? And then here, this one for the psoas trick, the thumbs, the 3 fingers go in, the thumbs go up and the pinky fingers go down. See how I even brought my hip in? So I'm imagining that these are the insertion points here, and these are the insertion points here in my back ribs. And these are my beautiful ribbons, and I'm expanding my ribbons, I'm opening my arms, and then through my hands, I'm gonna steer them in. Do you see how naturally, and this is obviously not scripted, just see the reflection. This is my tighter dropper. Could you see how my hand here was actually tighter and dropper? So now I need to get this one. On. Steering my hands in. Yeah, man. And I can feel that side and steering this in. So this is an example of a really good, and then still collapse here, suction this wing in more, draw this one in more. And then here, now I'm starting to steer inside these internal stabilizers to neutralize my structure, and it's having a wonderful effect on starting to release this habitual holder that has been trying to be my mover, but it's a superficial, dysfunctional holder that has been compromising the neural plexus and has been creating a pain pattern. And yes, it was from an old mountain biking injury, but no fuss, I can shift out of that patterning, reset my lines. And it's the same with, if you've been born with a certain patterning, you can slowly, with wonder and excitement, shift out of it and start to heal the outer structure to heal those inner lines. So there is a starting point. These, there are a lot more we can do with the neural tricks, and for the next installment, now that you have the whole story or the start of the story, I'll show you how we can take that and perfect the base and most functional position. So standing, sitting down, all fours, lying down, prone and supine. And we use the reference points of the earth, the spirit leveler, and we use the blocks and props to help imprint. And as a starting point, holding true to the same sort of the structure throughout, and seeing how we can navigate that with these clear landmarks to journey through with these rotations of consciousness to repattern body-mind connection and to literally restructure and be very comfortable in all those base positions. But those base positions, when you can hold this clarity net and neutralize your lines, balance your lines, make them symmetrical, it means that from there, you can access the most advancing moves and postures and freedom and flexibility. But also, when you are navigating through those more complex expressions of movements, you're able to hold them for real, meaning it is not just a pinky toe or an ITB band that is holding. One may appear that they are moving and holding the most advanced expression, but if you really settled into focus, if you had this patterning just from standing, that pattern will only accentuate further and worsen in the more complex expressions of these moves. If you can refine, redefine, and reset into your optimal, balanced harmony, symmetry in these base poses, and then you take that, all these different expressions and versions thereof, you'll be able to access the correct lines, and with that, the correct benefits of all these different poses. Right? You know, the poses are beautifully designed and engineered to give not only energetic and mental and psychic shifts, and to help with the shifts of lymph and blood and endocrinal messages. But when you can access the correct engineering and balance within them, everything learns to even out the load, and so too the right, beautiful expressions. I won't just say trigger, that's the wrong word, but of the benefits they are designed for. You will gain those benefits and you will not be compromising just being on autopilot conditioning, and what that ends up leading up, because with time it's not a good situation. So that is that. But although I gave that long story at the end, in essence, nothing to fear. It doesn't matter where you're at or what you're feeling now. It is so exciting when you can start to reveal the patterning. And that's one great benefit of the advancing poses. They will really highlight your patterning because they will show you the lines that are throwing you off and gripping in. But let's start with the base poses. Let's get those in a clear understanding. Use them for healing, for shifting and ironing out your personal patterning, using them to discern your patterning, and in them, with the use of props and with touch points and being diligent with discernment and visual gaze, shifting out of that rote behavior, and then using that as we put it into more complex forms and seeing and perceiving how wonderful the effect is in all the systems, and how to use the fascial lines to balance each other, and so on and so on. There's a start. Thank you.